Hi, I'm coming to you from an entirely different location than what I usually film videos in because I got evicted. It was completely out of nowhere. I don't know why it's happening. Yes, I have a lawyer. Don't want to talk about it. I just wanted to explain this setting because this is my friend's room. Lighting not ideal, filming setup not ideal, nothing is very ideal, but I just wanted to disclaimer before I start the video, but that's not what I want to talk about because the solution for what I'm currently going through, which is very stressful, is that I'm going to just pretend it's not happening and instead talk about Dungeons and Dragons. I'm also going to be crocheting while talking about D&D because I tried filming this video already and just straightforward like trying to talk to a camera and convey information made me really nervous for some reason, so I need to fidget with my hands. So basically I have been making completely from scratch a campaign for my friends that is magical girl themed, and I made some TikToks about it, basically like talking about the situation with I'm making it completely from scratch. This is my first time DMing, which if you're watching this and you are here for the crochet and not the D&D aspect, a DM is basically the dungeon master, so I'm responsible for running the game. And I also gave myself the challenge of writing the entire story completely from scratch rather than using a pre-established module. Basically, I created the entire like lore and everything for this world by myself. And when I posted about it on TikTok, I got a lot of questions about it, so I figured I would do a video basically explaining stuff about it and just chit-chatting about it because I'm having a lot of fun and I want to focus on a good fun thing right now. Also, I didn't explain what I was crocheting. I'm making a plush Majora's Mask for my friend who helped me a lot during the moving process. This doesn't really fit the vibe of the video. This is an entirely different energy, but this is what I'm working on right now, so I'm just gonna continue working on it. This guy has a bunch of like little spikes that are supposed to go around his head, so that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm using Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition as the base for my campaign, and when I said that I was doing this campaign in my TikToks and stuff, I got a lot of people basically being like, why are you using Dungeons & Dragons for this? A lot of people basically said like there's already magical girl systems that exist for like other tabletops, like entire tabletops about being a magical girl. The main reason I decided to do D&D 5e is because I'm already pretty familiar with the system and I didn't really want to learn the rules of an entire new tabletop when it's my first time being a DM. Also, the group that I'm playing with wanted to play specifically D&D, so I wanted to give them D&D, but also I didn't want to use a pre-established like magical girl tabletop because I wanted to make my own lore. I really like writing and like creating worlds and characters and stuff, so I didn't really want to use a pre-established thing. Because I know some of the tabletops I've suggested, I know Glitter Hearts is one, Girl by Moonlight I think is another one. They have like pre-established lore, I think. Don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% sure. But when I looked into them, it just didn't vibe with me because I kind of just wanted to do it all myself, which I think is something that is generally advised against for first-time DMs. But I already generally had an idea of a plot that I wanted to follow, so I already, before I even talked to my friends or anything, had this idea for a magical girl world and D&D campaign like written out and started, so I wanted to do my own thing. And that's what I did. I also had a lot of people ask me how I'm taking D&D and kind of like adapting it to be about magical girls. The situation I have set up is basically that it exists in like modern day, in like modern age, all this modern technology, all that stuff. Because from my experience watching magical girl animes and stuff like that, like it kind of needs to be modern day non-magical vibes. Like if you're a magical girl but you're in like a medieval fantasy environment, you're not really a magical girl because the entire thing about being a magical girl is that you're like special and chosen. And if you are a magical girl in like a place full of already existing magic, you're not really a magical girl. You're just like Bob, the 5th wizard that lives on that street. So 5e system, modern day, it's taking place in basically like a reskin of Seattle, or just like Washington state in general. Basically because that is the state I'm most familiar with because I watched Twilight. Nobody yell at me, nobody yell at me, nobody yell at me. Basically it's Washington in the sense that it has like a very diverse landscape, which I thought would be good for D&D, so I didn't have to just stick my players in one location and be like, great, you have to just take a plane every time you want to go to somewhere different. But it's a reskin because I didn't want to have to care about being accurate and I wanted to just kind of make my own towns and like fucking cities and stuff. I know it's probably stupid as hell to hear. It's like, yeah, I made like a fanfic version of Washington State, but that's that's what I did. So because it's like modern day and everything, obviously all of my characters are humans, and by humans I mean magical girl equivalent of humans, which in my game is Mythica, just because it's more gender neutral than magical girl. In my campaign, like being a magical girl, quote unquote, is not limited to just like women. So I wanted to make sure I just came up with a term that was more all-encompassing than just magical girl. Basically, the way I set it up for my players is that they can pick whichever race they want, even though they're going to be like visually presenting as humanoid, and that any like race abilities they would normally get from their race would just transfer over to their magical girl like abilities. I also had a couple of people mention that there is like a homebrew class for like magical girl as a class. We didn't end up going with that, and we ended up being a bunch of different classes because being just one class across the board and having every player be the same class is boring. So one of my players is a fairy druid, another player is an Aasimar paladin, and then another player is a halfling warlock. Sort of how I set up the magic system is that all of the abilities and like cantrips and stuff you get from your race are innate abilities you can cast at any time, and then the abilities that come from your class, you would need to do your magical girl transformation. This is a very loose rule because being like, I do a magical girl transformation to cast detect magic is stupid, and that would be really annoying in practice, but that's generally like the gist of how the magic would work. So it takes place in modern day, but with magical girls, and basically the way I have it set up is that it's kind of similar to like Unsleeping City, in the way that basically like average humans can't really see magical things that are going on around them at all times, but then once you awaken to your Mythica abilities, you can begin to see them. So an everyday human isn't just seeing someone like walking around casting magic, they would basically like perceive it as something mundane. But then if you are a Mythica who's awakened to their magical abilities, you start seeing all the magic stuff. Next things next, I'm going to talk about my players, because basically the way I pitched this to my players is I had like a premise and I was like, great, tell me what kind of like character you want to play, and then I will work backwards and make it make sense for the world. Especially since this is the first D&D campaign for all of my players, I wanted them to live out like whatever idea they had, so I didn't want to go ahead and write like a bunch of lore and then basically have to shoot down their idea because it didn't make sense for the pre-established story I had. So I came up with like a vague premise, the general rules of how everything operated, and then I said, go wild. First character is Aspen, and they are basically from like a secluded community in the forest. Think The Village by M. Night Shyamalan, but if it wasn't like a cult and wasn't scary. It's like a super cute little village that is more or less just like in a national park. Like the magical members of the community basically have wards and spells to prevent people from discovering it. So anytime anyone would wander into that area, they would just be like, and then no one ever discovers it. They awaken to their Mythica abilities because they're out hunting for like berries with their deer Maple, and they find an acorn that's like glowing. And basically in my world, you like activate your Mythica abilities by this like little round glowing orb crystal situation, and it kind of just like appears to you when you're being given your powers. And Aspen's comes in the form of an acorn, basically like, well, the most natural way for a druid and someone who's very in tune with nature to get their abilities would be through nature itself. So they're like, we're gonna send it through the forest, and then it kind of just got stuck in an acorn, and then Aspen's just like, I'm just gonna keep it in the acorn. So everyone else has like proper like Mythica crystals, and Aspen just has a glowing acorn. Long story short, Aspen brings the acorn to their parents and is like, hi, this acorn's weird and glowing. And they kind of are just like, yeah, sure, we'll check it out. And then at night, there's a storm, but there's no rain. And basically like Aspen like looks out the window and sees everyone in their village like covering their heads and like running inside as if it's raining, but there's no rain. And they hear thunder that is not followed by any lightning. And basically they're like, we have storms in this area pretty often, but never like this. And then big scary monster bear comes to like the border of the village, and then like the elders and their parents fight it off. And then they're like, oh fuck, there's like a bunch of scary shit out there. I have to go fight and protect people. I have to go pursue my destiny. And that's basically like how they find out magic exists. And then they like start off on their little quest to go, as you do, meet up with the other characters. Next character is Anise, who is a baker who lives in kind of like a town on the outskirts of the center city, and the town is called Madeline. I'm so glad one of my players wanted to play a warlock because that means I get to come up with a patron. We worked together to come up with like the vibe of the warlock patron, and we both decided it'd be really cool to do something involving like sleep and dreams. So we came up with our guy Revero, who my player doesn't really know that much about yet, but basically is a mythica who's trapped like in between the planes of like reality and dreams. Basically what happens is that earlier in the day, Anise goes to a graveyard and finds a really old gravestone that has a recipe written on it that doesn't have a name or a date or anything. It just says "Sleep well, my love," and has a little recipe on the top of it. And she bakes the recipe and then leaves the food there because she thought it'd be nice because the gravestone seemed very old and forgotten. And then that night she has a nightmare and is having like, I think we decided it was like a bad flea market where there, like all of her desserts are like covered in bugs and stuff. And then this like weird masked guy shows up at her table, and then sensing the danger, Mr. Revero plucks her out of there. And basically he's like, "Hi, who the hell are you?" Because he has not seen or spoken to anyone, and he doesn't even know how long, because he's just been trapped in this dreamscape, and the only thing he can see from the outside world is the gravestone that Anise interacted with. That was the gravestone of his past lover named Peter. And basically Revero is like, "Why am I only able to see you? No one ever interacts with this gravestone because it's like so forgotten. Like I've been in this dreamscape that I don't even know what the fuck is going on because I've been here so long." Kind of like when you are somewhere with no one to talk to for such a long time, you kind of start to lose track of reality. So he's like, "I feel like this is important and I feel like this is significant." So he gives her like a little like ring that belonged to his past lover, and she wakes up and she has her mythica crystal and the ring, and those are like the two places where she draws her power. And then lastly is Andromeda, who when I first introduced her is basically just like, "You're floating through the blackness of space, you have no mouth to scream." Basically, "I have no mouth but I must scream." And it's like, you don't know anything except for like distant twinkling stars and the blackness of space, and then you just wake up in a park in the center city of Capterra, which is more or less like the Seattle of the world I'm making. Andromeda basically is coming into our game with amnesia, partially because her player was like, "I didn't know what to do and I don't really know if I'm about all this backstory stuff," and I was like, "You want amnesia?" And she was like, "Yes." I was like, "I'll build your lore for you and just reveal it to you slowly, trust me." And she was like, "Okay, I trust you." So basically Andromeda comes into the game with absolutely no memories, and we join her in the game like 5 days after she appeared on Earth. It's actually really funny because as we've been playing, we've kind of retroactively decided, based off of the decision that the player had, that Andromeda is both allergic to gluten and blueberries, that when Andromeda spawned in, she was like, "What the fuck?" and then found a blueberry muffin, ate it, went immediately into anaphylactic shock, and then up until the 5th day when the campaign starts, she was just in the hospital. The best stories come out of just bits, honestly. So Andromeda doesn't know a lot about what's going on, but she's a paladin and she's badass and she's very like space themed. And obviously Aspen is a druid and they're very like woodsy, foresty, talks to animals, but also very like chipper and like naive and impulsive. I really love the way that all of my players are playing their characters. It's so like rewarding to see them get so into the game. And Anise is like the mom friend of the group, like is basically like, who are these jokers? Like it's very much just like a regular person who likes to bake, and then like someone who's from a reclusive community that doesn't interact with the outside world at all, and someone who started being on Earth 5 days ago. So their dynamic is very funny, and we're all having a blast and it's very cute and fun. I'm going to open up my book and kind of like look at the FAQs to make sure I cover everything. I had a couple of people ask basically like, is it Madoka magical girl, or is it like Sailor Moon magical girl, Cardcaptor's magical girl? I would kind of say it's neither. I'd say I'm kind of taking most of my inspiration from like Studio Ghibli and Steven Universe. I'd say that the themes are more adult than if it was something like Sailor Moon or Cardcaptors, but it's also not going to be like a grim, dark horror situation because my players explicitly asked me not to do that. I do really love horror, but I'm not going to subject my players to a horror campaign if that's not what they're interested in. So basically think like it only gets as dark as maybe like Princess Mononoke would get. Some Ghibli movies have pretty dark themes, so I tried to keep most of the vibes lighthearted. Hi, Fern! We have been joined by a cat. Hi, sweetie pie. I also got a lot of questions that are basically just like, how make campaign? The way that I started writing the campaign was basically I knew the ending and then I worked backwards. Like I had some cool ideas for where the story was gonna go and then I worked backwards from there. I did basically like the very end and then the like general like structure of the world, like the rules that would be followed and stuff like that. And then I checked in with my players and figured out what they wanted. And then I built everything else around that. Honestly, getting input from your players is something I would really recommend from a DM standpoint, because then you don't have to basically like say no to everything your players want. Obviously, you have to have limits on what can be done because it's boring if your players get to do whatever they want. There has to be limitations in order for them to have like challenges and room to grow, etc., etc. But for example, I wouldn't have really thought to think of like someone who could potentially be a warlock patron if my player didn't want to be a warlock. I'm also just someone who like really likes writing stories and making characters. I've been a simmer since the game came out in 2000, and even when I was like a little kid, I was very into making like pretty elaborate stories. Oh my god, a secret kitty. I was pretty into making like pretty elaborate stories and elaborate characters in my like sim worlds. I also have this thing which I don't know if it's embarrassing to admit, but like in order to get myself to fall asleep at night, I have pretty bad insomnia, but I basically like come up with like a world and like tell myself a story. Like I'm basically like writing a little novel in my head, and that's how I get to sleep. So I have a lot of unwritten experience writing stories, if that makes sense. My best advice if you wanted to basically just like start a campaign from scratch is think of like 3 or 4 really cool ideas for a world and then write them down, take each one and try to connect them to the other, and then branch off how it works outside of that. Basically create like a web where it's like, here's 3 random things that have no relation whatsoever that I think would be dope as hell. I just think they'd be cool to put in a story and I want an excuse to put them in. And then branch out, because then you don't have to basically like try and wedge in stuff that you think would be cool into a pre-established thing. You basically built the story that you can just insert all your dope shit, because the entire story is based off of these like 5 key moments that you already have really good ideas for. And then even if like the pieces that you're trying to connect have no relation whatsoever, that gives you a good challenge to like find creative ways for how they can interconnect. Something I mentioned in the TikTok I posted is that I just have thousands and thousands of words of lore, and I don't think you have to go that far if you want to build your own campaign. I just like it. I just don't know how to do anything at a normal percent. Everything I do is at like 300%. Another question is, how do you find the time? The answer to that is partially, it's a hobby, so I just spent a lot of my free time doing it. Second part of that answer is I spent way more time on it than I justifiably should have. But the main answer to that is that I kind of just took like months to make it. Again, I had already been writing this kind of like idea of this magical girl campaign before it was even settled with my friends that we would be starting it and I would be the dungeon master. I basically pitched being like, hey, I already have ideas for this. If you want to run a campaign, I got you. And then once they agreed, I started building off of it. But it took like a while of them like building up the ideas, planning, scheduling, like literally like 2 or 3 months, maybe 4, building up everything to get to the point of actually playing. It's not like I had 2 weeks and then wrote all this lore. Also, for anyone wondering how I'm following a pattern to make these like little horns while talking this much and not looking at anything, it's because I'm not following a pattern, I'm just winging it. They're all going to be slightly different, and that's special and magical and unique. And also, hopefully my friend doesn't notice. Another very, very common question I got is, can I please join? To which I am heartbroken to say, no, you cannot, because this is just a campaign I'm privately playing with my friends. Similar to that, people are like, can I watch it? Or is it being streamed anywhere? Or like, are there YouTube videos of it? Also, no, I'm sorry. My friends aren't really like content creators. This is a thing we're just doing for funsies. I'm a content creator. So I posted about this thing I spent a long time doing, and then people are like, oh, like, so you're gonna make content about it? And I'm like, no, that's just, I want to post a bit because I'm the dungeon master, but otherwise it's not really going to be like shown anywhere. I'm gonna like continue to like post updates about it and chit chat about it and stuff on TikTok, and also like make jokes about it and like update as much as I can as the story goes, but there isn't anywhere to technically watch the full thing. Sorry. Similarly, a lot of people are asking if they can have like the lore book or like a source book or a module based on this. And I would love to. I am a first-time DM. So I definitely would need to figure out how to put that together. And also I very much would need to get a little bit further in the campaign before I do something like that. I'm also not going to be going into like deep spoilers for the campaign for ideas that are happening because I don't want to ruin it for my players. My players are all lovely little humans who like watch my content, and I don't want even like a 1% chance of ruining any like surprises for them. Their enjoyment of the campaign is like my top priority, way more of a priority than making content about it. So I won't be like posting in-depth lore and details yet, but I will be posting about it as like the story progresses so that I can post it without spoilers. There have been a couple of people asking if I'm willing to like run another campaign. Just as a pitch, if you are my friend and you need a DM, there's a 50-50 chance that like, yes, I will DM for you. I've actually been trying to get my husband basically being like, find friends who want to play D&D because I want to DM another campaign. This is just the first one I'm doing, but I love playing D&D. I'm in one campaign where I'm a player and I really love playing, and I'm actually starting a second campaign where I'm a player, but I just feel like I was meant to be a DM. I love it so much. Like I feel way more comfortable in the DM chair than I do as a player. Like I really feel confident in what I'm doing, which is very unique for me because I really don't view myself as like a leader. I'm not really someone who likes to like put a spotlight on myself or like be in charge of things. I'm very much like a sidelines person. So it was definitely out of my comfort zone to decide to be a DM, but I knew it would be so fun, and I had a feeling I'd be really good at it, and I do think I'm really good at it. One of my players after the first session looked at me and said, "Is it this fun every time?" And that's like, that makes me so happy. Like that, it is really validating that my friends are having so much fun. It's very rewarding, and I'm having a great time. I love being a DM. That is completely off the point of the question and what I was trying to answer, but I'm just getting sappy because I'm having so much fun. Oh yeah, they also did combat, and it was my first time running combat, and I was really afraid I was gonna kill all of them. I was so nervous because this was like obviously my first time running combat as a DM, but it went well. I think mostly. I kind of deduced afterwards and then asked them to double check and confirmed that they didn't add their attack bonuses, like their modifiers, to anything. So they didn't hit that much, and I was like, damn, y'all rolling like shit. Only later to learn that they didn't use their spell attack modifiers or like their attack bonuses to their weapons. But we figured it out now, so that's fine. I've also had a couple questions about like my gear, I guess is the word for it, like my character sheets and like the stuff I've been using. So I'm gonna do a little tour and answer questions about that. I kind of showed a glimpse of the character sheets in one of the videos. These are the character sheets we're using. Look how cute. I think they really fit like the magical girl vibe of everything. I got this template from Starlit Sheep on Etsy. I did edit the PDF very slightly in Photoshop because the skills had like stars as like the place where to write the modifiers, and it's so impossibly small to fit the modifiers, so I just went in and added lines. I think I already mentioned this in a video, but I have this like notebook that I like added this vinyl sticker to. It's sparkly gold, in case you can't tell. Graphic design is my passion, and by that I mean I just made a bunch of squiggles and then printed it out, and I'm like, there, it's a crest. I've actually recently gotten a bunch of people ask where I got my DM screen because it's pink and cute, and I'm sure you can tell in this lighting that I very much just spray painted it. This was one of those like DM screens off of Amazon that had like a big dragon fighting a wizard on it, and I just spray painted it pink to match the vibe. I also have these like kind of like matchy cutesy DM inserts that are from Talia Joy Hale, also on Etsy. And then lastly, I made this brochure for what is basically like the magical girl hub in my game. Basically, once you awaken to your mythic abilities, you gain access to this like interdimensional HQ, if that makes sense. And it is the gem. I posted a more in-depth look at this on TikTok, but basically I just went on Canva and like made a brochure. I thought this would be a good idea because it was a lot of information. And I thought this would be useful for my players because then they wouldn't have to like continuously check with me about stuff like, where is this thing? Where is this thing? What stores are in the gem? And they could instead just have all the information in a cute little handy brochure situation. And also so they wouldn't have to write all this information down because that sounded annoying. Last thing, do you want to see my battle map? In the hustle and bustle of being evicted, I lost my battle map, which is basically like dry erase like puzzle pieces that have grid marks on them. So as a budget option to fulfill that before I could get another set of them, or until I could find them, I did a cheat code, which is buying wrapping paper that has 1-inch grid on it. A lot of wrapping paper has this like grid type of stuff on it so that you can like cut straight. That also makes for perfect battle maps because it has the same grid lines that the like battle system of D&D has. Also, yes, this very much looks like it was drawn by a child. I'm not an artist. But yeah, this was the first battle map. Basically the entire situation was that they had to go to like a little kid's house who couldn't sleep because they were being terrorized by miscreants who were keeping the kid awake. And basically the pitch was like, hey, y'all don't know what you're doing, but your magical abilities won't fully activate until like there's danger. So we're sending you on a quest that no one else wants to do because it's not really that dangerous and no one's life is threatened. But it does still eventually have to get done. This is like the house. This is like the kid up in the window. Basically my plan was to like get them to learn as many mechanics and like ins and outs of combat as possible without just throwing rules at them and like naming a bunch of stuff off. For example, I had things crawling up here and hiding in the trees, which gave them total cover. So they learned what total cover is. And anytime they did a spell that was like very loud or would like cause a bright light or something, they would have to do stealth checks to basically like make sure they don't wake the parents because they're doing this in the backyard of a family in the middle of the night. Playset, bushes, hose. Is this anything? I basically just wanted to throw as much stuff in there so they could like get creative and know that their only options weren't just like throw, attack, hit thing. So yeah, that's a quick chit chat about my Magical Girl D&D campaign. I hope you enjoyed the video. Also, I realized I never introduced myself. Hi, I'm Kokiri. I crochet and I like horror movies and I'm a dungeon master and I like thrifting, etc, etc. So if you like that kind of stuff and like fashion type stuff, you can subscribe if you want. That would be fun. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope if you were one of the people who wanted more information about the campaign, this satisfied your curiosity a little bit. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a very good day. Bye.